Well, we brought in 750 boxes this year, and I don't know, ding-wise or skin-splitting-wise, we didn't see very much, you know. So they must have done a pretty darn good job of sorting out those that we received and got distributed. So
we do try to do that well, so that people get the best that we can. But yet we also want the flexibility in it, because if the expectation is that they're going to get a perfect apple every time, that's an expectation we don't want to have from a certain standpoint, because we can't deliver that every year or every box. There is that mix and that variety, so people have to understand that. But that being said, we try to put the best that we can find in the box. And I should tell you how this got started. Several years ago, we had a hailstorm that came through, and it literally destroyed a lot of the fruit in the state of Washington. And so we saw that the growers were having to dump their apples just over the bank, if you will, because even the processors were so flooded with the amount of apples that they couldn't handle the demand. So you couldn't get any money going to a processor or a juice plant to take the apples. They just wouldn't refuse it. So we got to thinking, wow, all of these apples, they may have a hail ding here and there on it, but you're still, like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to bottle this and make applesauce, if you're going to juice it, if you're going to dehydrate it in a dehydrator, or even eating it, so it's got a little hail ding. It's not a rotten place. It's just it's a sight issue. And so we went to growers and said, look, we'll buy your hailed-on fruit, we'll sort through it, pick the best ones out of it, and market those. And we found that was a win-win. It was a win for the grower, because now he wasn't getting any money for his fruit. Now he was getting something, because this took place right before harvest time or at harvest time. And so they have all the growing costs into it throughout the whole year. And now here we have a hailed-on crop that they're having to just dump over the bank and not getting any money for it. So we were able to pay them some money for it. We're able to supply it to customers that we have, and they were getting a good eating experience, because it's a perfectly good apple except for a ding or two. And so it was a win-win for everybody. And in fact, I should also add, because this question does come up occasionally, why is it that these apples taste so good and are a good eating experience for the most part, versus what I buy in the store? And so let me just touch on that, because that's an important thing. And this is just my personal opinion from my years of observation in the industry. When a grower picks his apples and he sends it to the shed, there are lots of different factors, as we talked already, that go into that. If I, as a grower, walk out and I'm going to eat this apple today, I'm going to pick the apple and I'm going to gauge it, test it, and eat it, and say, yeah, that's a good tasting apple, it's ready to be picked, it's ready to eat, it tastes good right now as I pick it off the tree. However, because, as we mentioned earlier, that we pick in this small narrow window at the fall, but that fruit that's picked then has to last the whole next year until we pick again, that means then, in order for it to last, let's say 12 months in storage, that apple needs to be picked early. So the warehouseman may say, okay, we need you to pick that earlier than its best eatability experience, because we need it to last until next July, or June, or August, or whatever. So we need that apple to last that full season. And so the picking criteria, now we need it to be a harder, firmer apple. Now we need it to have less sugar, because the more sugar in there, it's going to break down sooner too, when you talk about storing for 12 months. And so there's this conflict that happens. When do we pick it? So there are standards that we use in the industry to be able to pick that fruit, but it's not the best eating experience. And then, as we've already mentioned, what happens is if you pick the apple too early, is it going to ripen? Is it going to continue to get sweeter? No, it's not. It will decay. It will ripen from that standpoint and decay and break down, get softer and dehydrate and get mealy and things like that. But as it turns out, it's not going to get sweeter and have a better eating experience as you hold it in storage. So that fruit that's picked earlier if that's made available into the marketplace, then you'll find that it's not as good an eating experience than otherwise. And there are lots of other factors that come in to play in this. And for example, what happens is we put it in common storage. And this common storage, we just hold it like a refrigerator, 33, 34 degrees. But there's also another long-term storage method called CA, or controlled atmosphere storage. And we can store an apple for 12 months, even longer if we wanted to, but to a degree. But we can store an apple now up to 12 months if all the conditions are right. And so when we as marketers, wearing the marketer hat now, look at that apple and say we need it to last that long, it's now in the channel, it's in the warehouse, it's in this process. And so if there's a glut of apples in the marketplace, for example, then we find that marketers are holding out for the better price, because that means it's supply and demand, so prices are low, they're holding out. Well, the longer they hold out for a little stronger prices, what's happening to the quality of the apple? It's sitting there in storage, it's slowly decaying, it's getting worse and worse in condition. And so a marketer will come along and say, oh, I got to move these, I've waited almost too long, so I'm going to make a sale on them, I'm going to reduce the price. So you'll get a grocery chain that says, oh, you've got a special on apples, great, I'll buy those up. So they'll buy 2 or 3 semi-loads of apples at that lower price, because the marketer needs those apples moved and out of storage because they're losing quality. When the apple is shipped, they're shipped in a refrigerated container, semi. That's good. But what happens when it gets to where they're going? Sometimes they'll end up in a larger situation, a distribution chain, where it'll be stored in a warehouse that's unrefrigerated. Well, if an apple's been in CA, or controlled atmosphere storage, the shelf life after it comes out is not very long. So you have 2 or 3 weeks while it still has good eatability. As you move farther outside that window, now the quality begins to deteriorate fairly rapidly. So now you have apples sitting in a warm environment. Now they need to be loaded on another truck to go to this grocery store, this grocery store, and this grocery store, and so they get reloaded and handled again and again and again, and finally they end up at a grocery store halfway across the country, and because space in the produce department, if you notice, is a high premium, and there's dry space, which is not under refrigeration in your grocery department, and there's a wet rack, and that is under refrigeration. And so apples have a very, if they're stored in a warm environment and they're put on the dry rack, then they're not going to hold up as well. If you find a grocery store that will put them under cold refrigeration on the shelf in the grocery department, that's a much better. But how often do you see that? You always see them out in the open air, warm, normal room environment, and they sit that way in the case in the back room of the grocery store. So now you have an apple that's out of storage, it's sitting in a warm environment, it's sat in a warm environment in a warehouse before it got to that store. They've been sold at a discount because they're starting to lose their legs, their life quality to begin with. And then we as consumers come and we find that we pick through the apples and, oh, this is a bad one, this is starting to rot, this has too many defects in it. We bring it home, we taste it, it's a little bit mealy and soft, and it's not a great eating experience. So you can see there's a whole process in that distribution channel that we need to figure out better as an industry and make better. And so when we supply apples to people, we're keeping them cold, they're as fresh almost as the day they were picked, because we try to get them right at harvest time into that cold refrigerated truck, right into people's hands, and then they can store them as we talked earlier. And that creates a much better eating experience for people, because they don't have that huge distribution chain that they're having to work with. We can cut out a lot of those middlemen.
Yeah, well, we feel fortunate to have this partnership with you.
Good.
It's a delight to receive the truck and have the smell of those apples. I envy you being in the orchard and having that blossom smell and the ripening apples when you do it. I know it's a delight to walk in the front door of this building, having them in the garage in that cold environment out there, and being able to smell from so many boxes of apples. It's fun for us to do. So thank you for sharing with us. It's
You're
like
welcome.
Discovery Channel that people could really learn about apples. There's certainly a science associated with this.
Well, we're happy to provide them, and we hope this helps answer some people's questions. And we're always happy to answer people's questions. So if folks that still have further questions, why they can get a hold of us through you, and that'd be great.
Okay.
To answer people's questions. It's good.
Good enough.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.